Hello, my darlings. How you doing? How's your week going? I hope it's lovely so far. You are back with me, Ed Stott, on That's Helpful, and I am so happy to have you here. Wherever you are listening from, whether that's your podcasting app or if you join me on YouTube, where I now am. Wow, get me. Like, I've only just switched over to using a digital calendar and putting that in my computer. I'm still using a paper calendar, but look at me, here I am on YouTube pushing the limits of my technological abilities. So don't let it go to waste. Come and join me over here and you can have a look at me and my beautiful guests. We're having a good time. Either just Google That's Helpful YouTube or find it via the link in the show notes. Now today we're talking habits. Habits can be a really powerful thing. Make the right ones and they're the shortcut to reaching your goals. Fall into bad ones and they can derail you at every turn. So how do you form the habits you actually want to commit to, like that new exercise regime or regular meditation, and break the ones that are holding you back, like reaching for your phone every 10 minutes? Oh my gosh, I'm so guilty. Or biting your nails when you're anxious. Today, I'm going to get you the answer to those questions, and we are going to give you the skills to build whatever habits you want and genuinely stick to them. You're going to love this conversation because you really get into the neuroscience of it and break down the simple steps that you can take to build new habits. And it's really going to change the way you see your brain and the things that you do every day without even thinking about them. It's a really great conversation. You're going to love it. One of the habits I'm trying to introduce this year is being more consistent with my nutrition, making sure I'm getting everything I need so I have the adequate brain power for the podcast, enough energy for my workouts, and the right nourishment to achieve all the things I have planned for the year, one of which, as you guys know, is growing a whole human from scratch. That takes a lot of scran. A simple shift that I found really helpful is U-Foods. They take the stress out of meal prepping and take on the mental load to make sure your meals are fresh, healthy, and nutritionally balanced. If you're looking to make a healthy shift this year when it comes to eating well, U-Foods could be the answer you're looking for. They're always adding new meals and tweaking recipes to keep it more delicious than ever before. And best of all, there's no cooking, no dishes, no cleanup. What a bloody win. Every week you choose from 60 meals, let gourmet chefs whip them up for you, and you have them delivered to your door, fresh, never frozen. Make sure to use my code HELPFUL, HELPFUL, for up to $200 off your first 5 boxes. Now, my guest today is Dr. Gina Cleo. She has a whole damn PhD in the topic of behaviour change and is an adjunct professor at Bond University in Australia. She's the author of The Habit Revolution. That's the thing, right, about habits. If you feel like you can't stick to them, so often you blame yourself and you're like, oh, I'm just these guys can stick to it. I'm just lazy, or I have no willpower, or I have no I have no self control. Like, I just am not the kind of person who can set in place these habits and make these changes. But it's not actually true, right? If you have a good system, all of us can start improving our habits and breaking the ones we don't want to break.
Exactly. We are constantly rewiring our brain. Every single day, every single moment, our brain is creating new cells and it's breaking down old cells.
Yeah.
And if we keep doing what we're doing, then we're going to reinforce the habits in our life. But every single one of us has complete capacity, ability, capability to rewire our brain in the way that we want to. We're not stuck with our brain. We can totally create new habits and break old ones, no matter how old we are or how long we've been doing something for, we can. And, to touch on the point that you said, we don't have enough willpower or self-control, like that's a whole other myth that I would love to get into. But why that kind of, starting a habit and then falling off the wagon and then starting again, sort of like yo-yo dieting.
Yeah.
Why that's so detrimental, actually, not just to our progress, but to our mental health, is because the number one predictor of success is something called self-efficacy, which is
Ooh.
the belief in our ability to achieve a task.
Yeah.
And the more we fall off the wagon, the more our self-efficacy takes a hit, and we start believing that we can't do things. We don't have what it takes. And then we stop trying. And that's sort of when we give up. It's a terrible place to be.
Completely. We had a brilliant guest on, David Robson, who wrote a book about I can't remember the specific term for it, but it's about the real scientific phenomenon that if you go, the expectation effect. So if you go into something with the expectation that it's going to succeed, or that it's going to be good for you, or that it's going to help, scientific studies have shown that just that belief genuinely translates into real impact. So 100%, it's so fantastic. So let's take it right back to the beginning. Tell me, what are habits?
Okay, so a habit, unlike a behavior, is something that we do subconsciously or automatically or mindlessly. It was a behavior once upon a time. So our behaviors are things that we do deliberately, like we actually consciously think about them. So it might be, how do I get from A to B, or what should I make for dinner? That's a behavior or a thought behavior.
Yeah.
And then when we repeat that behavior, like consistently, that becomes a habit. Our brain goes, well, I've done this so many times, I don't need to think about it consciously anymore because I've got a whole lot of other things to think about. So I'm going to put this in the automated part of my brain, which is actually a different part. And it goes into this like autopilot state. And that's what our habits are. They can be our behaviors, our thoughts, our reactions, our belief systems. And our habits make up to 70% of everything we do every day.
Wow. And so what's the difference between something that's a habit or something that's like an addictive behavior?
Okay, so they share similar qualities, habits and addictions, but the key difference is that our habits will give us some sort of reward. It might be, I accomplished that and that feels good. Or, this chocolate gave me some dopamine and that feels good. And that might be a habit. An addiction, on the other hand, feels really good. It feels like, oh my God, I need this again. Otherwise, my brain is going to shrivel into a raisin. And it sort of feels more like our life depends on it. Even when the addiction's harmful for us, we continue to do it. We're not as in control of it. Anyone can break a habit. Addictions, on the other hand, need sometimes a multidisciplinary team, additional support, potentially medications. So really, addictions are all about how much reward our brain gets from that behavior.
Yeah, right. I think that's such an important distinction because we use them interchangeably, right? Those terms, but they are quite different. Yeah. And so
we also use habits and behaviors interchangeably. And
yeah, that's true.
As well.
Yeah, so true. And I think until you start to break it down and really understand what each term means, you don't really understand how each one works and why you're doing each one, which is what the book is so great for. So why do we form habits? Why do they, you kind of touched on it a little bit there, but why do things become habits and certain things are just behaviors?
Habits are an adaptive process. You know, we make up to 35,000 decisions every single day. Our world is, full of reasons why we need to make decisions and, do certain things. And so there's no way that we could consciously live through our life if we had to make each and every one of those decisions deliberately.
Yeah.
Hence why our brain's like, if I've done this before, I don't need to think about it because I've got all this other stuff to think about. Yeah, I've got this. It's fine. Like driving a car. Like, think about the very first time you drove a car. I remember when I was driving a car for the first time, it was a manual, and I felt like I was using every single brain cell to do this task. Like making sure not to kill anyone and to stop before the line at the red light, not to go 1 kilometer over
not
the
to stall.
Not to stall, exactly. And now I often get to places and I think, how did I get here? I don't even remember driving. And that's because driving has become, quite automated in terms of a behavior. Interestingly, though, say there's like a storm or a car crash or a hazard, I will go back into my thinking brain and it'll become more behavioral, unless it's like smooth sailing and then I'm more in my habit. And that's what we do. We bounce back and forth between habits and behaviors all the time.
Yeah,
but that's why we have habits.
Yeah, they're like life's little shortcuts, right?
They are. Yeah. Our brain loves them.
And so habit triggers are a big part of like how habits work. What are they and why are they so important?
So every habit has 3 key ingredients, and the first one is the trigger. So we've got the trigger, the habit itself, and then a reward. The difference, again, between habits and behaviors is that every habit is triggered, whereas behaviors aren't triggered. So if you think of your morning routine, you might get out of bed and then there's a sequence that happens. It might be, going to the bathroom, brushing your teeth, showering, getting dressed, having breakfast. Like there's a sequence to it. And one habit triggers the other. It could also be when you sit in the car, you're triggered to put your seatbelt on. No matter where else you sit, you could sit, on a desk, like at your desk or at the kitchen table. You're not going to reach for your seatbelt.
Though I used to horse ride a lot and I used to reach for my seatbelt when I got on the horse.
That is adorable. Oh my gosh.
I was like, okay.
I love that so much. I would love to see little Ed like reaching for the seatbelt on a horse. I'd be like, I don't know what she's doing. This seems like some kind of there's
a lot you wouldn't understand about that picture. My too long back protector, my too big hat. There was a lot that would be funny about that picture.
So cute. My
try and find
habit
one.
scientist, please do. I'd love that. The habit scientist in me would be like, no, something's wired really wrong in this brain. I don't know how to decipher it.
You're broken.
You are broken. Classic. Okay, back to triggers.
Yeah.
So there are 5 key habit triggers, and research shows that all of our habits will fall into one or more of these triggers. So they are the time of day, the place that we're in, what we've just done beforehand, how we're feeling, and who we're around. So they can all be triggers. Time of day is like midday might trigger you to have lunch, whether you're hungry or not.
Yes.
The place is, classic. I was on an airplane yesterday. Place equals snack. Like literally everyone eats the snack at the same time. I'm like, how is it that 300 people are all hungry at the same time? They're not. They can't be. But, it gives us something to do. What you've just done beforehand might be, when I have breakfast, after I finish breakfast, I feed my puppy. So it could be something like that. And then emotional eating is a really common one.
Yeah.
Social situation, we do things more around certain people compared with others. Some people might prompt us to drink more coffee or more alcohol or eat more or swear more. We're very influenced by our environments.
Yeah, and that's so true, isn't it? Like, particularly, I think if you've been back home for the holidays, you'll have noticed that, right? Emotionally, if you're back home and people are pissing you off, it'll trigger certain behaviors. But also, I don't know if other people notice this, but when you go home, you're like, who am I? I'm like 16-year-old Ed again. Like, I'm doing all these things that I would never do ordinarily. And that's like that habitual behavior.
Totally. It's fascinating that you notice that, Ed, because a lot of people aren't mindful enough to really appreciate that. But that's exactly what it is. Our environment triggers our behavior. It triggers our habits. And if we're in a certain environment and we behaved a certain way, we had a certain sense of identity, we treated people in a similar manner, we ate certain things, we're going to do that again when we're back in that environment, unless we're super mindful and super aware, which is hard, right? We have to have quite a strong intention to not want to do that.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of people do when they go back to at their home or, the house they grew up in or around their parents, they become a different person, like the old them.
So weird, but very reassuring to know that it's not you, right? It's just these external cues. And so we touched a little bit on this at the beginning, but what have you learned about self-control and how it relates to habits in writing the book and doing your PhD?
Yeah, I mean, when I learned about the limitations of self-control,
right?
Oh God,
this blew my mind.
Yeah, changed my life. I started my career as a dietitian and then I moved into habit science and behavioral science. And I was a terrible dietitian. Like I'm just such a foodie and I'm Egyptian, right? Like everything is celebrated with a feast.
Yeah.
And
if
you're not eating like plenty, then you're not really celebrating. Like
and there's probably something wrong.
Exactly. Why are you upset? Don't you like my food? All those complicated things. And I was, my body changed quite significantly when I went through puberty and I was consistently in my sort of early 20s, late teens, trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
And I would do that through
yeah.
these like restrictive fad diets.
Yep.
And obviously you need a lot of self-control to do that. You know, prescribed under eating is hard work. That's essentially what a diet is. And I would constantly fail all the time. I've never succeeded. And I'd be like, oh, so frustrated with myself. Like, why don't I have enough self-control? I'm a dietitian. I know all the things. Why can't I just do it? And I realized through research, God, I love science, is that self-control is a fleeting and exhaustible resource. It's something like a bank account, and we can debit into it, and we credit it, we debit it, we're in and out of it all the time. And sometimes we wake up with plenty of it, and other times we don't. It's kind of like a friend. Sometimes we'll show up, and sometimes it's going to ghost you. And it doesn't just change from day to day. It changes from moment to moment.
Wow.
And the things that deplete our self-control, wait for it, is hunger.
Yep.
So calorie restriction, low blood sugar levels, making lots of decisions, taking initiative, being tired, fatigued, having a negative interaction with someone, or feeling any sort of negative emotion.
Yeah, right.
All these things deplete our self-control. So think about, a diet. You're hungry. I was hungry. I was restricting carbohydrates. I mean, I didn't do it for very long, half a day max, but I would end up just like binging on all the things I was trying to restrict. And then I realized it's because I'm coming from a place of being completely empty. I had no self-control. And the ways we replenish our self-control is through rest, meditation, taking periodic breaks, having something to eat, feeling positive emotions like gratitude and love and kindness. And so when I stopped trying to lose weight is when I was able to finally get to, a healthy weight. But it also happens in all areas of life, not just with our diets.
Yeah.
Every area that requires a lot of self-control is not sustainable. We cannot depend on our willpower to achieve things long term, which is why habits are like awesome, because our habits don't require self-control. They happen automatically.
Yeah, and that's so interesting, isn't it? Because the more I learn about, happiness and fulfillment and feeling content, and even, self-control is kind of in the same part. But like, if you go out and directly chase it, it's going to run away from you.
Yeah,
but if you do all the things that are good for it, and this is the same for happiness, like rest, social connection, eating well, getting enough sleep, then all those things are going to come to you, but just don't look at them directly, because they're going to run away, right? It's one of those things, right?
It's so true, yeah.
And so what's the system then? Because in the book, you really drill down on this, and it's so clear, like I was saying up the top, it's so clear and straightforward. But what's the system that we should follow to create new habits?
So there are 5 key steps to creating new habits, and you need all 5 of them. You can't skip any of them to actually effectively create new habits that stick. The first one is decide on a goal. And it sounds so simple, but deciding, the word decide comes from the Latin decidere, which means to cut off or to strike out any other options. It's not a half-assed commitment. It's I'm all in. I've made a decision. I'm committed to this. Because although the formula is easy, change is sometimes hard. Our brain doesn't like change. Like we talked before, it's making all these other decisions. It just wants to keep us in our everyday routine, because
and that's safe, right?
Totally safe. It's great. So the first one is really decide on your goal. Make sure it aligns with your values. The second is choose a simple action that's going to get you closer to that goal. So say, for example, if my goal is to get better sleep, I can do lots of things to get better sleep. It could be going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time. It could be reducing my caffeine and alcohol intake, plenty of actions I can do. And then the third step, one of the most important, is to figure out which trigger is going to trigger this new action. So where are you going to be? What time of day is it going to be? What have you just done beforehand, for example? So for me, if I want to go to bed on time, at, say, like at the same time every day, that might be, okay, so at 8 p.m., my little reminder will go off, letting me know I've got half an hour or an hour before it's bedtime. And then I start my routine. So then I know 8 p.m. equals wind down time.
Yes.
And I create that consistency with that trigger. We call it a cue response association. So cue, trigger, response is the habit. Cue, response, association. That's how we create habits. Step 4 is to track your progress. A lot of people don't do this, but it's so important. We use a habit tracker. There's plenty of apps. There's also paper-based trackers. I've got a list of all the apps on my website on a blog.
I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. You could download any of them. I don't have a particular favorite. I'm more like flavor of the month kind of person.
Yeah.
So it depends like what color scheme I'm sort of feeling is what app I'll use. But track your progress. You know, when you give a child a gold star for doing the chores and they feel awesome and motivated and they want to do it again, we don't grow out of that reward learning as adults. So when we give ourselves a tick, we actually release a little bit of dopamine in our brain, which feels great. And our brain's like, well, that felt good. We should definitely do that again. And it reinforces the habit. The other thing is a habit tracker allows us to actually visually see our progress because we tick off every time we do a habit. So we can look down and be like, look at my streak. I've been going for X amount of days and that feels really good. And then we don't want to break that streak. So it actually motivates us to want to keep going. Super powerful tool. And then, wait, was that step 4 or 5? Oh, wait, step 4, actually, just before that,
Rewind.
I am a habit researcher. Right? Rewind. Is every time you encounter the cue, actually do the habit. It's one thing to plan these beautiful plans. It's a whole other thing to actually take action.
Yes.
And there's a nuance with this. So say, for example, somebody goes to church just at Christmas time. So every Christmas they go to church. This habit only happens once a year.
Yeah.
But it becomes a habit because church, like Christmas, becomes associated with church. If there's a year or two that Christmas comes around and they don't go to church, that habit becomes weaker the following years because now they've got a missed opportunity. Now their brain's like, well, normally Christmas is church and we didn't do that. So now I don't actually know what's going on. And you can fall out of the habit. If you encounter the trigger and you don't do the habit that you've decided to do at that time, you're not strengthening the habit. You need to do the habit when you come to the trigger. And then self-monitor is number 5 with a habit tracker.
I love that. And so in terms of tracking the habit, obviously like the tick is a great feeling and I am a big fan of a list, like totally love that. But there are any other things that we should be tracking in terms of the habit that might motivate us to continue?
It's really just when we've done it. That's the only thing we need to track because that's the goal. It's actually doing the habit. It's a really good idea to evaluate the plan, see how these cue response associations are going. So maybe after a couple of weeks, you can have a look at your habit tracker and see if you're being consistent. If not, maybe the plan needs to change. Maybe the time of day that you've chosen isn't really working, or the place that you've chosen isn't like, there's no flow between that and the habit that you're doing. Like, you know, say for example, you want to floss your teeth more and you say, when I have a shower, I'll floss my teeth. There's no flow between those two things, but there is flow between brushing your teeth and flossing your teeth. So sometimes our triggers need to change and we just need to change the plan. And it's part of the process.
Totally.
And only a habit tracker can really tell us how we're going with our progress.
If you're looking to get some healthy habits going this year when it comes to your food and nutrition, U-Foods could well be the answer you're looking for. They take the mental load out of meal prepping and deliver gourmet, nutritionally balanced meals, fresh, never frozen, right to your door. All you do is hop online and choose what you like the look of from over 60 meals that are constantly being tweaked and added to, so they're more delicious than ever. Make sure you use my code HELPFUL, HELPFUL, for up to $200 off your first 5 boxes. That code is HELPFUL, HELPFUL, and I'll also pop a link in the show notes so it's super easy for you to find. And so how long would it normally take us to create a new habit?
Well, you've probably heard it's 21 days, right?
Yeah.
It's not 21 days. There's absolutely no scientific evidence behind that. I know. I wish it was 21
It would
days.
be so convenient.
Would it? But honestly, Ed, like think about it this way. You're so right. Think about it. If it was literally 3 weeks to change a habit, I feel like we would all be pretty perfect beings.
Totally.
Because you could kind of commit to anything for 3 weeks if you really want it. But here's the truth. Okay, it takes anywhere between 3 weeks and up to a year to change a habit or create a new habit. The reason is why it takes so long is actually depending on us, and we have full control over this time frame for the most part. Firstly, it's how consistent you are with the habit. Obviously, the more you do it, the more automatic it'll become quicker. It's how much reward you place on the value of that habit. So, for example, let's say I start Pilates and I'm like, oh, I'm noticing my body getting stronger and I feel really good. That's going to prompt me to want to do it again. Compared to if I don't notice these rewards, then I don't really have an incentive to do it again. So the value of the reward's really important. How stressed you are makes a difference. Stress can actually slow down our capacity to make changes, obviously. Like we're consumed with the stress that's going on. And so we're not likely to have as much capacity or space to create new habits. So stress management is really important with changing habits. And then also how habitual you are as a person. You know, I'm not a very habitual person, totally ironic for a habit researcher. My husband, on the other hand, my God, thrives on habits. Like homeboy will do the same thing no matter where we are, like for on holiday or at home.
I love it.
He does the same routines and he's just such a habitual person. So that also makes a difference as to how long it will take you to develop a habit.
Yeah, super useful to know. And so there's another kind of habit called a micro habit. What is that and how might we be able to use that to help change our behavior?
Yeah, so micro habit is a term that I've put to the idea of a smaller, simpler version of the habit that you're trying to create. So let's say that the habit you're starting is, let's say, a yoga practice. And you're like, okay, I want to do yoga twice a week, every week.
Yeah.
And you've never done yoga, let's just say that. And so you might decide to do the micro habit of that because the idea of say doing 2 yoga classes when you've never started can feel overwhelming for someone. Yeah, for sure. So you might start with doing maybe 1. You might start with doing something at home for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes until you get in the flow of it. You might even just start by rolling out your yoga mat and that's all you do for like a week. And then you increase that micro habit. The thing with our brains, and this part is really fascinating, we don't have to practice the entire habit for our brain to develop that habit. So here's an example. Yeah, this is super fascinating. All we need to do is start. Just take the first step. There's a chapter in my books. It's called The Power of Showing Up. Just show up. So I started powerlifting a few years ago. I don't powerlift anymore. I know. No, my body is not made for powerlifting. Like God did not bless me with that. But I really loved it at the time. The time that I just started powerlifting, my coach said to me, I want you at the gym 3 days a week, trainings at 5 a.m. I was like, cool, I can do that. A week into it, I got sick. I got the flu. And so I was down and out. And I wanted to continue developing this habit of getting to the powerlifting gym 3 times a week at 5 a.m. So what I would do is I would set my alarm to the same time. I'd get dressed. I'd get in the car. I'd drive down to the gym. And as soon as I got there, I'd drive home and get back in bed.
No way.
And yeah, and then as soon as I got better, like when my flu went away, I was already in the habit of getting to the gym. I didn't have to start from scratch. And this is the beauty of micro habits. It's the power of showing up. It's just starting. That's all our brain really needs to create the neural pathways between the trigger and the routine, these cue response associations. Starting's the hardest part, right? So if we just focus on just starting and we can humble ourselves to go 5 minutes of yoga is enough. Rolling out my mat's enough. Getting in my yoga gear is enough. We're actually really powerfully developing the habit of doing the bigger habit, which is 2 yoga sessions a week. But the idea is start small and gradually increase the micro habits.
I love that. I think that's so achievable and a huge mistake that so many of us make. Like, especially when you're thinking, oh, I need to do more exercise. I'm going to go to the gym every day and I'm going to do at least an hour
Yep.
workout. And then you're just like, oh, you can't even, like, nobody commits to that. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
totally.
And so in terms of those micro habits, that's really interesting. In just showing up, and in the book you talk about motivation too, and the fact that lots of us expect to get motivated before we do it, but in fact action is the key, right, for motivation.
Yeah, this is such a key point in the book as well. Is I think often, we want to wait for the new year or for Monday or after our birthday or when we get home from holiday and we feel like we're going to be more motivated at those times. And we sort of wait for it, right? Like I hear people all the time will say to me, oh, I'll start saving money when I'm motivated, or I'll start this hobby when I'm motivated to, even though I really want to do it. But here's the biggest motivation myth is action. So action is a prerequisite to motivation. Yeah. How many times, Ed, have you gone to exercise and you're like, oh, I don't really feel like it?
Every time.
So every time. And then what happens? Say 5-10 minutes into your workout, how are you feeling then?
So good. Yeah. You're like, yeah, got this.
Totally into it. You've never regretted it, right? Yeah. Motivation comes from action. It's not the other way around. We can't wait to feel motivated to start something. We have to start in order to get motivated. And this is another beauty of micro habits is it's so much easier to say, I'm going to do 5 minutes of this. We can all do 5 minutes or 1 minute, 30 seconds, doesn't matter. Just start it. And then once you start, that's when it starts to get easier and you feel more motivated to do it. And so don't think of these big goals. It's too hard to achieve. It makes our brain go, don't want to do it, too hard, too scary, too much of a change. Yeah. And so motivation is a product of action.
Yeah, I love that too, because it means that it makes habits way easier to continue. If you're not going for this crazy big achievable goal, or crazy big unachievable goal, if you're only doing this thing, and also presumably this works the same way. So if you've got a habit and you've kind of started at 5 minutes, but now you've worked out to like a half-hour workout every 3 weeks. Presumably, if you do get sick or you go away or something changes your routine, can you wind that habit back to still do that thing at that time, but make it like a 5-minute session?
Exactly. Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh, I'm hiring you as a habit coach. Yes, that's exactly what you can do. The idea is that, our capacity changes all the time. A child might be sick, or we've got a really stressful project on at work, or a deadline, or this family staying with us, or our capacity constantly changes. How much sleep we've had impacts our capacity. And it's important to flow with that and be kind to ourselves. Some weeks we're going to nail it. And other weeks we're going to have to pull back and just be gentle. But the idea is just show up, do the smallest amount possible as often as possible, and just keep showing up so that when you are having a good week, you can hit the ground running.
Yeah, I love that. I've never really thought about that continuation of the habit before, the fact that you can wind it back and still keep doing those. I really like that. I think that's going to be incredibly helpful.
Yay.
I know, I love it. And so then we kind of get now how we can create new habits and the system, the 5-step system towards that. But how can we break an old habit? Because often a lot of time and energy and mind has gone into creating old habits. And this, in some ways, is even harder than starting new habits. So how can we break old ones?
There's 2 proven methods to break old habits. And I want to start by saying anybody can break their old habits. You can teach an old dog new tricks, no matter how long you've been doing the habit. I've worked with clients in their 70s who have broken habits, and I've worked with people who had really strong habits that were able to break them as well. So the first way to break a habit is the easiest way. So remember back to that habit loop, that cue, routine, reward. We talked about how every habit's triggered by something. So no trigger equals no habit. We will only do the habit if we're triggered. So if there's a way to eliminate the trigger, awesome. Totally just do that. So for example, if having Tim Tams at home is super tempting and you're in the habit of eating Tim Tams every night, remove the Tim Tams. It's not that you're weak. It's not that you're, that you don't have self-control. It's nothing like that. It's literally like, this is your habit trigger, and your brain says, hey, every time we see this packet of Tim Tams, we eat a Tim Tam. So remove it. 30 days is what our brain needs to not do something that we feel quite strongly, I guess, drawn to sort of weaken that habit. Now, we can't always remove the trigger. Sometimes the trigger is like coming home or going to bed or waking up. Like we can't always remove it. So then what we need to do is replace that unwanted habit with something that we want to do instead.
Oh, I like
a really
that.
common one. Yeah, a really common habit people talk to me about is scrolling on their phone, say like before bed, just before bed. Scroll. It's terrible for our sleep, terrible for our, our mental well-being. So there's no point having your phone right next to your bed where you can reach it and you just say to yourself, that phone's dead to me. I am not going to scroll on my phone. Like you're going to scroll on your phone because it gives you dopamine. It there's entertainment, there's color and sounds and lights, and it's great. It's great. Like we love it. So don't try to do that. Don't have it near you. Now you might want to replace it with something like, say, like reading.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is have a book that you really want to read near you on your bedside table. I would advise not to have the phone and the book, because the phone's still going to win. It's much more exciting than the black and white pages of a book. So put your phone somewhere you can't reach it, plug it in somewhere else, and have your book there. You're going to impulsively grab your phone. You're going to want to grab your phone. But if it's not there, then you're going to have to grab the book. So that's how you break a habit, and it's through consistently doing that. I had a client, and I find the story so helpful for people, so I'd love to share it. And I do share it in the book. A client, I call her Vanessa. She used to have a glass of wine every day when she got home from work.
Yeah.
You know this one? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Vanessa was just so drawn to this. But her doctor really wanted her to reduce her alcohol intake, and she wanted that as well. But she said to me, I come home, I have all intention not to drink, and I come home, and before I know it, I'm already halfway through a glass of wine. Like, how is it that I've grabbed the glass, I've poured the wine, and I'm sitting on the couch, and then I realize what I'm doing? I'm like, of course, because habits are automatic. They're subconscious. We're not aware of them all the time. So I rearranged her environment. I moved all the wine glasses from the cupboard, put them into another cupboard, and then in that cupboard, I put all her tea mugs up there. So when she'd come home the first day, she, impulsively opened the cupboard to get her wine glass, and she was like, oh, there's tea mugs here. Reminded her that she said that she would have a cup of tea rather than the wine. Now, I also put the wine in a really hard to reach shelf in the garage where she had to get a stepladder to access it. She could have got it any time. I wasn't restricting her from anything, but I created a barrier. And this is what's really important. Sometimes that barrier is just enough for us to be like, oh, it's too much effort. I don't want to do it.
Totally. Yeah.
And with our phone, that can be something like set a really annoying long password, deleting the apps off your phone so that you have to literally go into a web browser and log in every time to the social media apps. Creating barriers is not restrictive, but it creates effort. Like we have to move, and our brain's all about the path of least resistance. So it's really helpful to break a habit like that.
Yeah, I love that. I really like that. Super helpful story. One of the things that I've started doing, this lovely company, LH Agenda, sent me this gorgeous book. It's like a gratitude journal, and they even put my initials on it, which I love. Anyway, it's this brilliant gratitude journal, and it's just like pages of morning reflections and evening reflections. And so I've started doing this when I wake up in the morning with the 5 minutes that I would have scrolled on my phone, and when I go to bed, and it's been life-changing. It's genuinely helped so much, because when you wake up in the morning and you pick up your phone and you see one thing, and that can set the tone for your whole day.
It does.
Whereas if you push that further out until your brain's actually working and you've had your coffee and you're ready to go, I highly recommend this, or that kind of system. Like you can just do it in a notepad, but I just really like that journal. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, those simple things have really helped me.
Yeah. For sure. Do you remember what it was like when you first did it? Like when you first stopped using your phone first thing in the morning? Like, did you have resistance, or what was that like?
Yeah, and I found myself reaching for my phone, opening up my phone, and then going, "Oh wait, no, I'm not doing that." Because the other thing that I've been doing is spending the weekends off social media. So doing offline 48. So I've been not using Instagram, not checking the news, not doing emails, nothing like that on my phone, and now every Saturday or Sunday, it feels weird if I go, like it's the opposite effect. It feels weird if I go and use Instagram, if I go and try and go on social media.
Good.
Yeah, it's great.
I love
it really
hearing
works.
that.
It really works.
Yeah, and that's what habits are. Like, it feels weird when we don't do them. And if we've broken a habit, it feels weird when we do it again, which is wild because at the time, it feels like we're never going to break this. This is part of almost who we are. It's part of our every day. Like, what do you mean I'm not going to go on my phone all weekend? Like, that's a really long time. But all it takes is consistency and persistence and truly a strong intention to want to do something. And we can rewire our brain in any which way we want. And I think that is the most empowering thing that I can share with people.
I love it. It's so empowering. And so you spoke there a little bit. You spoke about like this kind of approach of like total abstinence. What do you think about that as a strategy?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm not normally a fan of abstinence because I'm not an all or nothing fan.
No.
I also don't ever want someone to feel like they can't have something around them because that's really disempowering.
Plus, it doesn't work, right? Because then you go out the house or you go into a different situation and then you're surrounded by the thing that's the trigger.
Totally. When I was growing up, so I moved from Egypt to New Zealand when I was 8 years old.
Aww.
And I remember getting to New Zealand and being like, what are Fruit Loops and Cocoa Pops? Like, my friends have like really awesome food and we have like flatbread and cheese and tomatoes for breakfast. I want this sugary stuff, please. And my mum wouldn't buy it for us, which look, I'm grateful for now.
Yeah.
But whenever I'd go to a friend's house, oh my gosh, I was like elbow deep in the cereal
was that kid,
boxes. Yeah, totally right. So, because it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
And we don't want to create that dynamic. But the research does show that if we're feeling really, really drawn to something, like we feel almost on the edge of being out of control with it, having 30 days of abstinence can weaken the neural pathways in our brain that make us drawn to that thing.
Okay.
So I think it can be a powerful tool. I think it's really important to limit it to that time frame and know that it's just a short period of time. You're just helping your brain along and you can go back to it in a healthier way later.
Yeah, that's great and reassuring. And I've definitely found that even in doing like the 2 days off social media, for the rest of the week, I feel like I'm less hooked on it. Like I feel less impulsive to go and check my phone and go and check notifications and that kind of thing. Yeah, I really found that. Yeah, I know.
I was in Cuba earlier this year and we didn't have any internet there.
How good.
And I was so good. It was a week of it. And it was super weird. Like the first few days, like I'd just check the weather or, try to do something. I'm like, I can't even check the weather. Like, I was like, how do people function here? Like, how do you have any information for anything?
Yeah.
And then like after the week had finished, I actually kept my phone on airplane mode for like another week. I was like, don't contact me. I was
good.
It felt so good. And I had the same thing as you, Ed. I now use my phone way less because I've felt the value and the benefit of not using it as frequently as I was before. And it's exactly what you have experienced as well.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I think I'm going to do that soon, 100%. And so if we do have a setback when we're trying to make or break a habit, how can we get back on track?
Well, it's definitely not if, it's when.
Yeah.
And I heard Brene Brown say this one time. It's not if you fall, it's when you fall. And I was like, I'm a high achiever. Like, I don't have to fall. It's like, you don't know me.
She says from the ground.
Right? Totally. Like, come on, you don't know me. This is where I want to be.
Yeah.
But, it's backed by research. She's absolutely right. Life happens and it's when we fall. And it's not a complete relapse. It's just a blimp. And it's the difference between people who succeed and people that go completely off, like fall off the wagon entirely. It's how quickly and how effectively we get back up again. And it's about our mindset.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you were saying before about our mindsets around, is this just an opportunity to learn, or is this like, have I just fallen and failed at something?
Yeah.
I like to, share the story of Thomas Edison when I'm talking about, setbacks. This brilliant man who took 1,000 attempts to create a light bulb. And his attitude behind it, when a journalist asked him, what was it like to fail 1,000 times? He's like, I didn't fail 1,000 times. Like, the light bulb was just a process of 1,000 attempts.
Yes.
And it's that mentality, that positive, outlook on something. Yeah, it makes all the difference, because then we can have self-compassion. We can go, everyone falls. Like, ask Oprah. She has had so many setbacks and she's like brilliantly successful. Mark Zuckerberg, like, you name it, they've had setbacks. And it's really just about, okay, I've had a setback, normal, totally cool. I'm going to get back up again. Instead of waiting for tomorrow or Monday or the new year or whatever it is, just start now. Start small and do as much as you can, just a little bit at a time, but just know it's part of the process. I always say creating habits or breaking habits is a process of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's how it works. So don't expect a linear process for any sort of change.
Yeah, that's really reassuring. I love stories like that. It's brilliant. And so if we are just consistently struggling to make or break a habit, and we want to go back to the drawing board and kind of reassess, like you said, where we might be going wrong, what are some of the key things that you've seen with your clients, with the people that you work with, that kind of are common things that can throw you off?
I would say the biggest hurdle is trying to create a goal or reach a goal that's too big.
Yes.
Or trying to do too many things at once.
Yes.
Often we want to overhaul our lives. And I think it's a great ambition on paper.
Yeah.
But it's really hard for our brains to actually achieve that. So our brains are capable of only making up to 3 changes at one time.
Yeah,
and
interesting.
The smaller, the easier. The smaller, the better. The smaller, the more consistent we're going to be. And consistency is the secret sauce to changing our habits. So that's what I would say. How can you make your micro habit even more micro? Can we change the goalposts a little bit more so that you are achieving your habit more consistently, which is going to boost your self-efficacy, make you feel really good about yourself. And that's going to make you more driven to want to achieve bigger and better things. So that is literally the number one thing I see.
Yeah, right. And so if we only take one thing from the conversation around starting or, making or breaking habits, what's the one thing you want people to remember?
Oh, there's so many though.
I know, there's so many amazing ones. You can have 2 if you want.
Amazing. Honestly, the one thing is, I know the idea of starting small sounds nice and we hear it all the time. But it's harder. It's much harder to do it than say it, because we want to achieve everything yesterday and we want to achieve all our goals straight away. We don't want to start small. Like, the idea of just rolling our yoga mat out feels like we're not succeeding. We're not moving towards anything.
Totally. Yeah.
But if I was to say one thing, it's get rid of the idea of go hard or go home, or if your goals don't scare you, they're not big enough. Those messagings it's rubbish. It's not true. Our brain does not work like that. Small steps consistently is exactly what we need to achieve big things. Small things will snowball into big things. So it's okay to do those small things. It's part of the process. Accept them as part of the process. I think that would be the number one thing, is truly humble yourself and start small.
Yeah, I know, which is such a challenge, isn't it? But such brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Gina. I really appreciate it. This has been absolutely fabulous.
Thank you. It's so fun to chat with you, Ed.
So fun. I can see we've just scraped the surface of those 10,000 words, but man, have you done well there. Jeez, goodness me. I know. Dr. Gina Cleo has her PhD in the topic of behavior change. She is an adjunct professor at Bond University in Australia, and her book is called The Habit Revolution. I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes, so make sure you check it out, because we've talked through a lot here, but if you want it all, written down so you can work through it, and there's way more science in there too that you can check out. I'll pop that in the show notes for you, and also make sure you're following Dr. Gina on social media to give you a little habit boost in micro form, but not too much, and not in the morning, and not before you go to bed. You only check it in those times that you want to, that it's not a habit. That's my only rule there. And also, don't forget that this episode was brought to you by my dear friends over at YouFoods. Make sure you use my code HELPFUL, HELPFUL, for up to $200 off your first 5 boxes. Take the stress out of meal planning. One thing that I have learned is if I'm trying to make a habit, make it as easy as possible. And one of the things that really helps me is outsourcing to wonderful companies like YouFoods, who can help you really get on top of your nutrition and be consistent in making sure that you're getting everything you need from your food, which obviously is the foundation for everything that you want to do this year. It's a really great idea. Make sure you check that out in the show notes. As I mentioned, we are over on YouTube now, so if you want to catch me and Pinchy, my little dog, in the flesh, if you want to see us as well as hear us, make sure you head over there too. You'll see my beautiful smiling faces of my lovely guests, and it's just another fun thing. So if you're a YouTube person, come and check it out via the link in the show notes. And obviously, as I always ask you, if you haven't already and you're enjoying the podcast, please leave me a review wherever you're listening. I would really appreciate it. Honestly, I've had a couple of lovely ones in the past week, and it genuinely, when you send them across, it makes my bloody day. It can be a bit like shouting into the void with podcasting. I know you guys are out there, and I have the faith that you guys are enjoying what I'm putting out, but just when you get those little bits of lovely feedback, honestly, it's just the loveliest thing in the world. So thank you to everyone who's left a review. I read every single one of them, and I adore them. You go on my gratitude list, and that is a very good place to be. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Ed Stott, and I sincerely hope that's helpful.